Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday's Thought for the Day. It's another beautiful day here, and I think we're in for a good few days of really nice weather. So get the barbecues out and enjoy yourselves. You know, as a teenager, trying to make sense of life. And when you're a teenager, trying to make sense of life is incredibly difficult. And one of the things that I did, I suppose, was to start going to church and start going to St Albans. And in doing that, I became increasingly aware of injustice in the world. And I began to shout loud and clear about my views to anyone who would listen, and also to anyone who wouldn't listen. And I was a bit of a firebrand, I think, but I was thirsty, and I wanted to learn more, and protest more. And I saw in the figure of Jesus a social justice hero, someone to follow and emulate in the course of challenging injustice. I was on a mission. I think I must have been obnoxious to some adults, but I continued nonetheless. My core values haven't really changed. I suppose I've learnt the art of discretion, of choosing the right moment for the best effect, better ways to present my case, but hopefully I haven't watered down the message, and it's still an integral part of my faith. And of course, so justice is an integral part of the gospel, isn't it? To claim anything otherwise, it is, I think, to misrepresent Jesus, because Jesus says he came to proclaim the gospel to the poor, which included liberty for captives and healing for the hurting. And there's a lot of debate, isn't there, about the terms social justice and social gospel. But I think the argument's just like, debating the colour of the wallpaper while the building's burning down. In a sense, it doesn't. You don't have to care what you call the fire. It's here. There are people of colour who live in a world of racism. There are people who are impoverished who feel they can never rise up. There are people being trafficked and enslaved around the world. There's corruption in all sorts of areas, in political fields, and societal fields, and all around the world. And the gospel, sure, Dan does speak to all those things. And there are real people dying because of the issues of poverty and of racism and corruption in our world. Those are injustices, and the Bible speaks against such injustices and makes them central to God's message. The prophet Micah defines what God really wants of people by saying, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. And in the early church, James says that true religion is to visit orphans and widows in their affliction. And furthermore, Jesus said that when he returns, he'll be able to tell who his followers are by their love for the impoverished, the hurting, the marginalised, and the oppressed. Now, I'm not saying that we aren't saved by grace alone, Jesus, by Jesus' sacrificial death, because we are, and I believe that. But the problem is when the doctrine is divorced from the action. The two aren't in opposition to one another, but one and the same. Right thinking isn't enough without right action. Right action without right thinking also is problematic. When Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, he replied that it was to love the God with your whole being. And he also said the greatest second commandment is like this: love your neighbour as yourself. And when Jesus was asked, who is my neighbour, he replied with the well-known story of the Good Samaritan, didn't he? The first century years, Jewish years, the Samaritan wasn't good but bad. The Samaritan had the wrong religion, the wrong culture, the wrong ethnicity. Jesus says the person closest to loving his or her neighbour is the one who crosses those divides, those racial, those cultural, those ethnic divides, to self-sacrificially help the oppressed. Jesus repeatedly defined eternal life as involving believing in him, but he also made clear that only those who embrace acts of justice understand that eternal life. A rich man asked Jesus, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And after some discussion about keeping God's commands, Jesus tells the man to sell all his possessions, give it to the poor and follow him. But the man goes away with his chin on his chest, feeling sad. A person with the eternal life of Jesus acts justly and self-sacrificially. That's central to the gospel. Even the story of the Good Samaritan starts with that same question: what must I do to inherit eternal life? See, Jesus has a different economy in mind, a different way of living. He wants us to create an economy where equality is in place, where the impoverished and the marginalised are empowered. The gospel, according to Jesus, is not just about what a person believes, but also how he or she lives. He prioritises justice for the impoverished and marginalised. And I find any version of Christianity that fails to prioritise that very difficult. While the rest of the world is hurting, maybe many want to argue about what the gospel is without really acknowledging the real point of it. The real point is salvation and transformation, and both require action on our part. Well, take care of yourselves. Have a really nice week, and I'll speak to you next Monday. Bye-bye. God bless.